All right, hi, I'm Michael Lombardo. I am the founder of Book Nook. I'd like to go back in time with you to the year 1996. Beauty and the Beast dominated the box office, the Spice Girls had taken the world by storm, and the majority of Americans cast their presidential votes for Clinton. And Irene Fountas and Gay-Sue Pinnell released a book that every teacher in America in elementary schools today lives by, even if they don't know it, guided reading. And in so doing, gave launch to an entire industry of horseshoe-shaped tables in elementary schools all across the country. The principles of guided reading, for those of you who aren't familiar, is the idea of students having a shared experience around a text, of having conversation points while they read, what's called dialogic reading, making it interactive, collaborative, and using the reading experience as a chance to help kids master other standards and to ultimately improve both their fluency and their comprehension in reading. 20 years later, we have continued to invest as a country in education, and although that has recently topped off, early reading proficiency is basically stuck. Ever since the National Assessment of Educational Progress began in the early 90s, it's budged by a few percentage points, but not much. And the guided reading experience looks pretty similar. We even have the Beauty and the Beast poster, and once again, the majority of Americans cast their presidential votes for Clinton. Why hasn't this changed? And what is that? There you go, it lands, it's the joke. Why hasn't guided reading changed? And why hasn't guided reading, which teachers have embraced as a best practice, which is validated through a mountain of academic research, why hasn't it improved early reading achievement? And the answer fundamentally is three things. It's people, people, and people. The fundamental challenge of guided reading is there are 20-something other little bodies in that room while the teacher is sitting with those students, and not all of them can have a guided reading experience at the same time. Schools also have a shortage of educators who have training in guided reading, who know how to implement it with success. And small group instruction is just really hard. And even very experienced teachers struggle with group management, keeping students on task, making sure that all those little hands are on the same pages. And so fundamentally, even though it's a really sound research practice that's been really effective, it hasn't really moved the needle for schools. And it's recognized as a best practice, but rarely executed successfully. I spent the last 10 years of my life scaling a national nonprofit called Reading Partners that tried to solve this at the people side of the equation by just giving schools more people. Reading Partners put 15,000 volunteers into schools every week to have them do guided reading exercises with kids. We grew it to a $30 million a year annual operating budget, partnered with 85 school systems across 11 states. And ultimately, we ran into the same wall. People, people, people. There are only so many volunteers. You can only get them into so many schools. The schools that needed the volunteers the most were usually the places where volunteers didn't want to go. And so I left and did something that very few people in the nonprofit sector do. I founded a social enterprise instead and created something called Book Nook. That's a hybrid technology approach to the people problem of guided reading. Book Nook is a platform that syncs devices across a number of student and teacher users, up to 4 students at a time, and gives them 2 fundamentally different experiences. There's what we call a reading guide, and the reading guide leads the instruction. That person gets led gently by the hand through a scaffolded experience that prompts them with what to do, gives them choices, but controlled choices, and helps them to put into practice all of those guided reading principles that Fountas and Pinnell wrote about 20 years ago. The students, on the other hand, mostly just see books, and occasionally are asked some questions that help us understand whether they liked the books and what they feel, how they feel they did with their reading, what their confidence is like. What that enables us to do is to provide a really structured experience that can happen both one-on-one and small group using a variety of different people as reading guides. What we see is schools using our very simple user interface to put not just teachers into the role of reading guides, but other caring adults and even peers in the building. Because, as you can see from the screen grabs, it's taking you by the hand step by step through each phase. We also have a great text library that we developed as custom text. We place a value on culturally relevant text since all the schools we work with are Title I schools. And you'll see the student experience is designed to be both fun and interactive. It also provides them with choices around text so that they feel empowered in the educational experience. But again, they have no idea that the person working with them may not have a lot of experience teaching reading. And so schools, in our use cases so far, have been really creative in seeing what kinds of people can become reading guides. And so we solve the people problem in 2 ways. We both expand the people using people that are already in the building, what we sometimes think of as the non-teacher adults, which there are a surprising number of in schools. which can include paraprofessionals. Oftentimes schools have tutoring staff. There are volunteers, there are parents and caregivers, and then of course teachers themselves, many of whom use this as a guided reading exercise during in-classroom, as well as an intervention context as a Tier 2 or Tier 3 intervention out of the classroom. We launched our pilot with 6 schools in the San Francisco Bay Area in October, and went to our beta software with 28 school users in January, and have seen a pretty rapid uptick over time in the number of sessions that schools are tracking per month. So we're finding great traction both in schools choosing to adopt as well as the amount of adoption in schools. And most importantly, it works. And so we track data in 2 ways. Both our system gathers data on student performance on specific reading standards, as well as student fluency as measured across the 4 domains of fluency. And we see that the vast majority of students demonstrate significant improvement when we look at how they perform against a standard the second time they encounter it versus the first, and how the reading guide observes things that are very difficult to track without observation, like the student's expression and phrasing when they read. We also get school data, and our system uses Fountain Sentinel, ironically, to benchmark students. And translating our school's data into benchmarks, looking at mid-year, we've only done this for half a year at this point, we were really delighted with the gains that students showed. And because most of the students who referred to us were significantly below benchmark in reading, they were an average of 3.4 Fountain Sentinel levels below benchmark when they started. After just 3 or 4 months, they narrowed that gap to 2.9. So they weren't just making gains, they were narrowing the gap. And if you translate that into months equivalencies, 86% of students gained more than 5 months in reading skills after 2 months using Book Nook, which is very exciting. We see the potential for this as not just being in schools and school adjacent. So when we expanded our pilot, we also included after-school programs in public housing, which are interesting school adjacents. And we also see, though, enormous potential for parents. Every parent has had the experience of feeling their student or their child struggling with a reading principle and wanting to help them. Book Nook is a chance for them to do that in a way that's leveled by the school, that attacks the problem that just the student needs, and that is easy to use with a user interface that a parent can feel supported in. And we put together a pretty impressive team to develop the reading pedagogy and curriculum. Our curriculum was led by David Pearson at UC Berkeley, who is the yin to the Fountain Sentinel yang. And we've got an experienced team of technologists and educators that are working to continue to scale Book Nook. So thanks very much. I would love to talk to more of you after the presentation today.